I was staring at my empty fuel shed when I realized that someone had just condemned 3 missing hikers to death. My name is Quentin Sanders, and I live in Timber Ridge, a gated community nestled in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. For the past 8 years, I've been part of the volunteer search and rescue team that operates across Carroll County. We're a tight-knit group of about 15 people who drop everything when the call comes in. Today, that call had come at 6 in the morning, informing us that 3 college students from Boston had failed to return from their weekend hiking trip near Mount Washington. The temperature was dropping fast, a late March cold snap that nobody had predicted, and these kids were reportedly underdressed and low on supplies. I'd rushed to my property to prep my snowmobile and gather the specialized fuel blend we use for winter rescues. The machines need a specific high-performance fuel to operate reliably in extreme cold and high altitudes. Regular gas doesn't cut it when you're racing against hypothermia at elevation. I kept about 50 gallons stored in clearly marked containers in my shed, which was positioned at the back corner of my 2-acre lot. Except when I got there, the shed was open and completely empty. I stood there in the early morning light, my breath fogging in the frigid air, trying to process what I was seeing. The padlock had been cut clean through. My fuel containers were gone, every single one. The shed still smelled like gasoline, so this had happened recently, very recently. My phone buzzed. It was Derek, our team coordinator. "Quentin, what's your ETA? We need to move now. Weather window is closing fast." "Derek, I've got a problem. Someone stole all my fuel. I can't run the snowmobile without it." There was a pause. "What do you mean stolen?" "I mean gone." "Completely cleaned out. The lock was cut." "Jesus. Okay, can you source more? We really need your machine. You know that northern sector better than anyone." I did know it. I'd mapped every trail and ravine in that area over years of rescue operations. "I'll figure something out. Give me 30 minutes. I hung up and immediately called the only place within reasonable distance that might have what I needed, Morton's Supply, about 20 miles away in North Conway. They opened at 7. I checked my watch. 6:15. While I waited, I walked around my property looking for clues. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There were tire tracks in the dirt near the shed. Fresh ones. And I recognized the tread pattern because I'd seen it just 2 days ago, parked in my driveway. It belonged to Brenda Patterson's white Lexus SUV. Brenda Patterson was the president of the Timber Ridge Homeowners Association, and she'd been making my life miserable for the better part of 6 months. It had started when I'd installed motion sensor lights on my shed after some teenagers had been caught vandalizing properties in the area. Brenda claimed the lights were too bright and violated some obscure HOA regulation about external illumination. I'd pointed out that the regulation she cited was about decorative lighting, not security features. She'd insisted it applied to all lighting. We'd gone back and forth, and I'd eventually agreed to angle the lights downward so they wouldn't spill onto neighboring properties. But that hadn't been enough for Brenda. She'd started finding other violations. My grass was supposedly too long, even though I cut it every week. My trash cans were visible from the street for 10 minutes on collection day before I brought them in. I'd left my truck parked in my driveway instead of the garage for 3 days while I was reorganizing my workshop. Each time, I'd get a formal letter threatening fines. The most recent dispute had been about my fuel storage. Brenda had somehow found out about it and claimed it violated fire safety codes. I'd shown her the permits I'd obtained from the county, the inspection certificates, and the documentation proving everything was up to regulation. The shed was specifically designed for hazardous material storage, with proper ventilation and fire suppression. Everything was legal and safe. She'd been furious that she couldn't find a legitimate violation. The last time we'd spoken, 3 days ago, she'd been standing in my driveway, her face red with anger. "This is a residential community, Mr. Sanders, not some industrial storage facility. People don't want to live next to what amounts to a gas station." "It's not a gas station, Brenda. It's properly permitted fuel storage for emergency equipment. I'm part of a search and rescue team. Lives depend on this equipment being ready. I don't care if you're with the National Guard. There are rules in this community, and I will find a way to enforce them." Now, staring at those tire tracks, I felt a surge of anger so intense I had to take a few deep breaths to calm down. Had she actually stolen my fuel? During an active rescue operation, I called Morton's Supply. A tired voice answered on the fourth ring. "Yeah, Morton's." "Hi, this is Quentin Sanders with Carroll County Search and Rescue. I need about 40 gallons of high-performance snowmobile fuel immediately. It's an emergency. You have any in stock? Let me check." I heard the phone being set down, footsteps, and then silence for what felt like an eternity. Finally, the voice came back. "I've got maybe 10 gallons of the premium blend. That's it. Season's winding down, so we don't stock much this late. 10 gallons would get me a couple hours of operation at best, not nearly enough for a full search operation that could last all day or longer." "I'll take it. Can you have it ready in 15 minutes? "Sure thing." I jumped in my truck and started driving, my mind racing. I called Derek back. "I can only source 10 gallons. It's not enough." "Damn it. Okay, we'll have to reorganize the search grid, put you on a shorter sector." "But Quentin, this really hampers us. Those kids are in serious trouble. The temperature's supposed to drop to 15 degrees tonight." The weight of that settled on me. 15 degrees. If those hikers were injured or lost, if they didn't have proper gear, that could be fatal. "I know. I'm doing everything I can." "What happened to your fuel anyway?" "I think my HOA president stole it." There was a long pause. "You're kidding." I wish I was. I made it to Morton's Supply in record time, loaded the fuel, and headed straight to the staging area at the base of Mount Washington. The parking lot was already full of trucks and trailers. Our team was geared up and preparing equipment. I pulled in next to Derek's truck and jumped out. Derek met me, already in his cold weather gear. He was a lean guy in his 50s with a weathered face and sharp gray eyes that missed nothing. "We've got a problem," he said before I could speak. "State police just called. The other 2 teams that were supposed to join us can't make it. One's dealing with a pileup on Route 16 and the other's short on operational equipment. We're it." "What's the search area?" "About 20 square miles. The student's car was found at the Liberty Spring trailhead. Their planned route was up to the summit, but nobody's seen them since yesterday morning. They missed their check-in time last night. 20 square miles with an undermanned team and limited fuel. This was getting worse by the minute." "Put me wherever you need me most." Derek pulled out a map and pointed to the northern quadrants. "This is your territory. We need you to sweep these ravines here and here. They're the most likely places someone would get into trouble. But with only 10 gallons, you're looking at maybe 3 hours of coverage max. I'll make it count." I spent the next 2 hours navigating steep terrain and dense forest on my snowmobile, calling out for the missing hikers, checking every potential shelter spot and danger area I knew. The cold was brutal. My face mask kept freezing from my breath, and I had to stop periodically to clear ice from my goggles. The landscape was beautiful and deadly, all white peaks and dark evergreens under a steel gray sky. My fuel gauge was dropping faster than I'd hoped. The terrain was rough, requiring more power than I'd calculated. By hour 2, I was at half tank. I needed to make a decision: push deeper into the search area and risk not making it back, or turn around now while I definitely had enough fuel. That's when I heard it. A faint sound, almost lost in the wind. I killed the engine and listened. There it was again, a voice. Weak but definitely human. I keyed my radio. "Derek, I've got something. Northeast ravine about a quarter mile past checkpoint 7. I hear someone calling. Copy that." "What's your fuel status?" I checked the gauge. "Maybe 45 minutes of operation left. That's cutting it close for extraction. Do you have visual?" "Negative, still tracking by sound." I moved forward carefully, following the voice. The ravine narrowed here with steep walls on either side. Dangerous terrain. Then I saw them. 2 figures in bright blue jackets, waving frantically. They were huddled against a rock face, and one of them appeared to be injured. I pulled up and dismounted. Both were young, probably early 20s. The woman was supporting the man who had his leg extended awkwardly. "Search and rescue," I called out. "How many are you?" "3, the woman said, her voice cracking. "Our friend went for help yesterday. We haven't seen him since. Jake's leg is broken. We've been stuck here since yesterday morning." I did a quick assessment. The young man, Jake, definitely had a lower leg fracture. Both of them were showing early signs of hypothermia: shivering, confusion, slurred speech. The fact that their friend had left yesterday and hadn't returned was deeply concerning. I radioed Derek with an update and got Jake stabilized as best I could. But now, I had a serious problem. I could get these 2 out, but I didn't have enough fuel to also search for the 3rd hiker. And leaving someone out here overnight in these conditions was essentially a death sentence. "Did your friend have any gear when he left?" I asked. "Just a light jacket and some water," the woman said. "We gave him our emergency blanket. He was going to hike down to get help." That was bad. Really bad. If he'd gotten lost or injured, he had minimal protection. I made the call. "Derek, I need immediate backup at my location. I've got 2 victims, one with a serious leg injury, both hypothermic. But there's a 3rd person unaccounted for, been missing since yesterday morning with minimal gear. Quentin, we're stretched thin. The closest team is 90 minutes out. These 2 can't wait 90 minutes. The guy with the broken leg needs medical attention now. What's your fuel status?" I looked at the gauge. The needle was dipping into the red. Maybe 30 minutes of operation, not enough to search for the 3rd victim and extract these 2. The decision was made for me. I had to get these 2 out. We'd have to send another team for the 3rd hiker, which meant more delay, more exposure to the cold. All because Brenda Patterson had stolen my fuel. I got the 2 college students loaded onto my snowmobile, the woman holding onto Jake, who was strapped into an improvised rescue sled I carried for emergencies. It was slow going. Every bump and turn elicited groans of pain from Jake. My fuel gauge was firmly in the red now. I was calculating distances in my head, trying to figure out if I'd make it back to the staging area. I didn't. We were still 3 miles out when the engine sputtered and died. I radioed immediately. "Derek, I'm out of fuel, 3 miles northeast of staging. I've got the 2 victims with me, but we're stuck." "Copy. We're sending a rescue sled your way. Ida, 40 minutes. 40 minutes. I got the emergency blankets out and wrapped both students as best I could. We huddled together, using body heat to stay warm. Jake was going in and out of consciousness, which terrified me. The woman, whose name I learned was Emma, was crying softly. "Is he going to be okay?" she asked. "We're getting help," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Stay with me, Emma. Keep talking. Tell me about yourself." She did in fragmented sentences. They were students at BU out for a spring break hiking trip. It was supposed to be an easy trek. They'd checked the weather, planned their route. Everything should have been fine. What about your friend? I asked. What's his name? Tyler Chen. He's pre-med. He was so confident he could get help, I should have stopped him. We should have stayed together. The minutes crawled by. Jake's breathing was becoming shallow. I knew we were in a race against time now. Emma had stopped talking, just staring blankly at the snow. Finally, I heard the sound of engines. Derek arrived with 2 other team members on snowmobiles, pulling a rescue sled. "Let's move," Derek said tersely. We transferred Jake and Emma to the sled and started the journey back. Derek fell in beside me on the ride back to base, my dead snowmobile left behind to be retrieved later. "State police are organizing a larger search for the 3rd student," he said over the radio, "but we've lost critical time." Back at the staging area, paramedics immediately took over Jake and Emma's care. Jake was loaded into an ambulance within minutes. Emma was being treated for moderate hypothermia. I stood there, watching them work, feeling the weight of failure. One student was still out there, and we'd lost hours of search time. Derek walked up beside me, pulling off his helmet. "It's not your fault, isn't it? If I'd had my fuel, I could have covered more ground. I could have searched for Tyler while backup came for Jake and Emma. If you'd tried that, you might have 3 bodies to recover instead of 2 survivors and 1 still missing. You made the right call. Tell that to Tyler's parents." Derek was quiet for a moment. "Tell me about this HOA situation. You really think they took your fuel?" I explained the whole thing. Brenda's harassment, the escalating violations, her threat to find a way to enforce the rules, the tire tracks that matched her vehicle. Derek's expression darkened. "So because of some power-tripping HOA president, we had compromised search capability during an active rescue. That's what it looks like. You need to report this. Now. This isn't just petty theft, Quentin. This is interference with emergency operations. People's lives were put at risk." He was right. I pulled out my phone and called the Carroll County Sheriff's Office. I explained the situation to the dispatcher, who connected me with a deputy. Deputy Williams arrived at the staging area 30 minutes later. He was a stocky man in his 40s with a no-nonsense demeanor. I walked him through everything: the missing fuel, the tire tracks, my ongoing disputes with Brenda Patterson, the impact on the rescue operation. "You have proof the tire tracks belong to her vehicle?" he asked. "I can show you photos of the tracks at my property and her vehicle's tires. They're distinctive. Plus, she's the only one who had motive and who knew about the fuel storage." "That's circumstantial, but it's a start. Let's go take a look at your property." We drove to my house in Timber Ridge. The HOA community was picture-perfect as always. Manicured lawns, uniform mailboxes, houses painted in approved colors. It all looked so peaceful, so orderly. Nobody would guess that the woman running this place had potentially condemned someone to death over a power trip. Deputy Williams examined the shed, took photos of the cut lock and the tire tracks, and made detailed notes. Then we walked next door to Brenda's house. She answered the door in a pristine white sweater and pressed khakis, her blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun. She was in her late 40s, with sharp features and eyes that immediately went cold when she saw me. "Mr. Sanders, what is this about?" Deputy Williams introduced himself. "Madam, I'm investigating a theft that occurred early this morning. About 50 gallons of fuel were taken from Mr. Sanders' property. Did you see or hear anything unusual last night or this morning?" "No, I did not." Her tone was clipped, defensive. "Madam, are you the president of the Timber Ridge Homeowners Association?" "Yes, I am." "What does that have to do with anything?" "I understand you've had some disputes with Mr. Sanders regarding his fuel storage." Brenda's face flushed. "That storage is a safety hazard and violates community standards. I've been trying to get it removed for months. But it's properly permitted, correct? The permits don't override HOA regulations. Actually, madam, they do. State and county law supersedes HOA rules, but that's not why I'm here. The fuel that was taken was being used for emergency rescue operations. 3 hikers are lost in the mountains. 2 have been found, but 1 is still missing. The theft of this fuel directly compromised the search operation. Brenda's face went pale. I had nothing to do with any theft. Madam, would you mind if I examined your vehicle? You have a warrant. I can get one, but cooperation would be appreciated. This is a serious matter. Brenda hesitated, then stepped aside. Fine. It's in the garage. We walked through her immaculate house to the garage. Her white Lexus SUV sat there, gleaming. Deputy Williams knelt down and examined the tires, then pulled out his phone and compared them to the photos he'd taken at my property. These look like a match, he said. Madam, is this your only vehicle? Yes. Where were you between midnight and 6 this morning? Here, sleeping. Can anyone verify that? I live alone. But I'm telling you, I didn't steal anything. Deputy Williams straightened up. Madam, I'm going to need you to come down to the station to answer some questions. Am I under arrest? No, madam. But this is an active investigation and I need a formal statement. Brenda looked at me, her expression a mixture of fear and fury. This is your fault. You and your ridiculous emergency equipment. None of this would have happened if you just followed the rules. Following the rules. Brenda, someone might die because you stole emergency fuel during an active rescue operation. Do you understand that? I didn't steal anything. But her voice lacked conviction. Deputy Williams asked her to follow him to the station. As I watched them leave, my phone rang. It was Derek. We found Tyler. My heart stopped. Is he alive? Barely. He's in critical condition. Severe hypothermia, possible frostbite. They're airlifting him to Dartmouth Hitchcock. But Quentin, the state police investigators want to talk to you. They're asking questions about why we had limited search capability. I'm already working with the sheriff's office. They're questioning Brenda now. Good. Because the family is going to want answers. If this kid doesn't make it, there could be serious legal implications. I drove to the hospital in Lebanon where Tyler was being treated. Emma and Jake were there too, both stable. Emma was sitting in the waiting room, wrapped in blankets when I arrived. She looked up, her eyes red from crying. Is Tyler okay? She asked. He's alive. That's all I know right now. This is my fault. We never should have come up here. We weren't prepared. Emma, you made some mistakes, but you're college kids on a spring break trip. You're not the first to underestimate the mountains, but you survived. Tyler's fighting. That's what matters. A doctor came out a few minutes later. Tyler's parents had arrived, a middle-aged couple who looked devastated. The doctor spoke to them quietly, and I heard fragments. Critical condition, touch and go, next 24 hours crucial. I felt sick. This young man's life was hanging by a thread, and part of me couldn't help but think that if I'd had my full fuel supply, if I could have searched longer, covered more ground, maybe we would have found him sooner. Over the next few days, the story exploded. Local news picked it up first, then regional outlets. HOA president accused of stealing emergency fuel during rescue operation ran in the Boston Globe. The story had everything. Power-hungry HOA endangered hikers, a race against time. Brenda Patterson denied everything, but the evidence was mounting. Deputies had found my fuel containers in her garage, still half full. She'd hidden them under tarps behind her car. When confronted, she'd claimed she was confiscating them because they violated HOA rules and planned to return them after proving her point. Proving what point? Deputy Williams had asked her during the interrogation, which I later learned about through court documents. That he can't just do whatever he wants in this community. There are rules. I'm responsible for maintaining property values and safety. So you took fuel that you knew was being used for emergency services. I didn't know there was an active rescue happening. But you knew Mr. Sanders was part of search and rescue. You knew the fuel was for that purpose, and you took it anyway. I was going to give it back. When Brenda hadn't had an answer to that. The district attorney charged her with theft, interference with emergency operations, and reckless endangerment. The interference charge was particularly serious because it could carry up to 5 years in prison if convicted. The reckless endangerment charge stemmed from Tyler's condition. Prosecutors argued that her actions directly contributed to his life-threatening injuries by limiting search capability. Tyler spent 2 weeks in intensive care. He lost 3 toes to frostbite and had kidney damage from the hypothermia, but he survived. His parents were talking about a lawsuit against both Brenda and the Timber Ridge HOA. The HOA board held an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to remove Brenda as president. They released a statement condemning her actions and promising full cooperation with law enforcement. Several board members resigned, claiming they'd been pressured by Brenda to enforce overly strict interpretations of the rules. I was sitting on my porch one evening, about a month after the incident, when a car pulled into my driveway. It was Tyler's parents. My stomach tightened. I wasn't sure if they blamed me for what had happened. Tyler's father, a tall man with graying hair and tired eyes, approached me. His wife stayed by the car watching. "Mr. Sanders, I'm Robert Chen. This is my wife, Linda. I know who you are. How's Tyler? He's home, recovering. It's going to be a long road, but he's alive." Robert paused, seeming to struggle with his words. "We wanted to thank you." "Thank me. I'm the one who ran out of fuel. If you'd had more, you might have found Tyler sooner. But that's not your fault. We've spoken with the other search and rescue team members, with the state police, with everyone involved. You did everything you could with what you had. You found Emma and Jake when you did, which gave them the best chance. You made the right calls. Tyler almost died. But he didn't. And that woman who stole your fuel is facing criminal charges. We're also filing a civil suit, not against you," he added quickly. "Against her and the HOA. What she did was criminal and inexcusable." Linda Chen walked over and handed me an envelope. "Tyler wanted us to give you this." Inside was a handwritten note on lined paper, the handwriting shaky but legible. "Mr. Sanders, I know I screwed up going for help alone. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I just made everything worse. When they found me, I was pretty out of it, but I remember them saying that you'd found Emma and Jake and got them out. You saved their lives. I'm sorry you got caught up in all this HOA drama because of us. Thank you for not giving up, Tyler." I had to turn away to hide the tears that sprang to my eyes. Robert Chen put a hand on my shoulder. "You're a good man. What you do, volunteering for search and rescue, it matters. Don't let this experience make you doubt that." After they left, I sat on the porch for a long time, watching the sun set over the mountains. The same mountains that had almost claimed 3 young lives. The same mountains I'd spent years helping people navigate safely. The preliminary hearing for Brenda's criminal case was held in May. I testified about the fuel storage, the theft, and the impact on the rescue operation. Derek testified about how the limited fuel had forced us to reorganize the search grid and reduce coverage area. State police investigators testified about finding Tyler, about how close he'd come to death, about how the extended search time had contributed to his injuries. Brenda's lawyer argued that she'd never intended to interfere with emergency operations, that she'd simply been trying to enforce HOA rules, that she'd planned to return the fuel. But the prosecutor hammered home the fact that she'd cut a lock, stolen property, and hidden it in her garage. Those weren't the actions of someone planning to return anything. The judge found probable cause to proceed to trial on all charges. The civil lawsuit moved forward as well. The Chens were suing for medical expenses, pain and suffering, and punitive damages. The Timber Ridge HOA's insurance company was trying to distance themselves from Brenda's actions, claiming she'd acted outside the scope of her authority. But the Chen's lawyer argued that the HOA was liable because Brenda had been acting in her official capacity when she targeted my fuel storage. I was named as a witness but not a defendant, which was a relief. Still, the whole thing was exhausting. Depositions, court appearances, media requests. I just wanted to get back to normal life. The trial took place in August, 6 months after the incident. The courthouse in Ossipee was packed. The case had attracted significant attention, becoming a cautionary tale about HOA overreach and a rallying point for people who'd had their own nightmares with homeowners associations. I sat through 3 days of testimony. Emma and Jake both testified about their ordeal, about watching Tyler leave to get help, about the cold, the fear, the relief when I found them. Tyler testified from a wheelchair, still dealing with mobility issues from the frostbite and nerve damage. He described the confusion and disorientation of hypothermia, of being found barely conscious by a search team, of waking up in the hospital missing toes. Medical experts testified about hypothermia, about how every minute counts in cold weather emergencies, about how Tyler's extended exposure had caused lasting damage that might have been prevented with earlier rescue. Derek and other search and rescue team members testified about operational procedures, about why specialized fuel was necessary, about how the theft had compromised our capabilities. Brenda testified in her own defense. She was composed, almost defiant. She maintained that she'd been trying to enforce legitimate community rules, that she'd had no idea an active rescue was underway, that she'd intended to return the fuel after making her point. The prosecutor destroyed her on cross-examination. Miss Patterson, you cut a lock to access Mr. Sanders' shed, correct? The lock was preventing me from inspecting a potential HOA violation, and removing 50 gallons of fuel was part of this inspection. I was confiscating materials that violated community standards. Did the HOA bylaws give you authority to confiscate property without notice or due process? I have broad authority to enforce regulations. That's not what I asked. Did the bylaws specifically authorize you to confiscate property? Brenda hesitated. Not specifically, but yes or no, miss. Patterson, no. Did you know Mr. Sanders was part of the county's search and rescue team? Yes. Did you know the fuel was for search and rescue operations? He told me that, but I didn't know if it was true. So you thought he was lying? I thought he might be exaggerating to avoid compliance. And you took the fuel when? What time? Around 5 in the morning. Why so early? I wanted to avoid confrontation. Or did you want to avoid being caught? Objection, Brenda's lawyer called. Withdrawn, the prosecutor said smoothly. Miss Patterson, after you took the fuel, where did you put it? In my garage. Under tarps, correct? Yes. Hidden, stored. When were you planning to return it? When Mr. Sanders agreed to relocate his storage facility. So you were holding his property hostage to force compliance with your interpretation of HOA rules. I wouldn't put it that way. How would you put it? Brenda didn't have a good answer. Her lawyer tried to rehabilitate her on redirect, emphasizing her good intentions, her years of service to the community, her lack of criminal record. But the damage was done. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. They found her guilty on all counts: theft, interference with emergency operations, and reckless endangerment. Sentencing was scheduled for 6 weeks later. The prosecutor recommended prison time, arguing that Brenda's actions had endangered lives and showed a callous disregard for public safety. Brenda's lawyer pleaded for leniency, house arrest, community service, anything but prison. Before the judge announced the sentence, he asked if anyone wanted to make a statement. Tyler's father stood up. "Your Honor, my son almost died because this woman decided that HOA rules were more important than human lives. He's 21 years old, and he'll never regain full mobility in his right foot. He's had to give up his dream of becoming a surgeon because he can't stand for the hours required in an operating room. Our family has been devastated, both emotionally and financially. We believe Miss Patterson should face the maximum penalty." The judge nodded solemnly. Then he looked at Brenda. "Miss Patterson, you held a position of trust in your community. Instead of using that position responsibly, you engaged in vigilante enforcement of rules, putting your personal vendetta ahead of public safety. Your actions directly contributed to a young man's life-threatening injuries. While I acknowledge that you didn't intend for anyone to get hurt, intent doesn't change the consequences. You stole property you knew was used for emergency services. You hid it. You showed no remorse until you were caught." He sentenced her to 3 years in state prison, with eligibility for parole after 18 months. Additionally, she was ordered to pay restitution to me for the fuel and damages, and to pay medical expenses not covered by the Chen's insurance. Brenda broke down crying as the bailiff led her away. Part of me felt satisfaction, but mostly I just felt tired. None of this would give Tyler back his toes or his career dreams. The civil lawsuit settled a month later. The exact terms were confidential, but sources told me the Chens received a 7-figure settlement from the HOA's insurance company and Brenda's personal assets. The Timber Ridge HOA itself underwent massive restructuring, adopting new bylaws that limited enforcement powers and required board approval for any actions beyond issuing warnings. I stayed in Timber Ridge, mostly because I loved my property and refused to let Brenda's actions drive me out. The new HOA board was respectful and professional. They actually apologized formally for what had happened and thanked me for my service to the community. My fuel shed was upgraded with better security, and I got a letter from the county officially recognizing it as emergency services storage, exempt from all HOA regulations. I also got a new lock, this one thick enough that it would take serious equipment to cut through. Search and rescue operations continued. We had a quiet summer, mostly helping lost day hikers and responding to minor injuries. Every time I loaded fuel into my snowmobile, I thought about that March morning, about Emma and Jake huddled in the ravine, about Tyler fighting for his life. In October, I got an unexpected visitor. Tyler Chen pulled into my driveway, walking with a noticeable limp but under his own power. He'd filled out since I'd last seen him, looking healthier and stronger. "Mr. Sanders, I hope I'm not intruding." "Tyler, not at all. How are you doing?" "Better. Physical therapy is helping. I'm back at school actually. Changed my major to emergency medicine, paramedicine. Figured if I can't be a surgeon, I can still help people in crisis situations." "That's great, really great. I wanted to give you this." He handed me a small package. Inside was a handheld GPS unit, top of the line. "For your search and rescue work. It's got some new features that might help in the field. Longer battery life, better signal in mountains, that kind of thing." "Tyler, you didn't have to do this." "I wanted to. You saved my friends' lives. And you tried your best to find me with what you had. That matters." He paused. "I also wanted to tell you that I've been talking with some people at school, and we're starting an initiative to educate hikers about mountain safety. What to pack, how to prepare, when to stay put versus trying to hike out. We're calling it the Timber Ridge Project." I felt a lump in my throat. "That's a hell of a thing, Tyler. You're turning something terrible into something good. Trying to. I figure if we can prevent even one person from making the mistakes we made, it's worth it." After he left, I sat on my porch again, this time feeling something I hadn't felt in months: peace. The mountains stood silent in the distance, beautiful and dangerous as always. People would keep getting lost. Emergencies would keep happening. But we'd keep responding, keep searching, keep bringing people home. The following spring, I got a call from Derek. A group of teenagers had gotten turned around on a trail near Mount Chocorua. It was an easy rescue, routine even. I loaded my snowmobile with fuel from my secure shed, checked my equipment, and headed out. The teenagers were fine, just embarrassed. We got them back to the trailhead within an hour. But as I was packing up, one of the kids, a girl about 16, approached me nervously. "Are you Quentin Sanders?" "The guy from the news last year." "That's me." Our school talked about what happened, about the HOA lady and the fuel. We did a whole unit on it in civics class about the limits of association authority and stuff. It was pretty crazy. "Yeah, it was." "Well, I just wanted to say thanks for coming to get us. And I'm glad that lady went to prison. What she did was messed up." Out of the mouths of teenagers. "Stay safe out there, okay? And always tell someone where you're going." "Will do." I drove home as the sun set, painting the mountains in shades of orange and purple. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek. "Good work today. Beer this weekend." "Sounds good," I typed back. Life went on. Brenda Patterson served her time and was released after 20 months on good behavior. I heard through the grapevine that she'd moved to Florida, far from the mountains and the community she'd tried to control. The Timber Ridge HOA continued to function, but with a much lighter touch. Property values stayed stable. People mowed their lawns and painted their houses and lived their lives without fear of zealous enforcement. Tyler graduated and became a paramedic in Boston. He'd send me updates occasionally, stories from the field, photos of him and his crew. He'd made peace with the change in his career path, found purpose in emergency medicine. Emma and Jake both graduated too and stayed friends with Tyler, their bond forged in that cold ravine. As for me, I kept volunteering with search and rescue, kept my fuel shed stocked and secure, kept training, kept responding, kept bringing people home from the mountains, because that's what mattered. Not HOA regulations or property values or petty power games. What mattered was being there when someone needed help, having the equipment and resources to do the job, and never giving up on finding someone who was lost. Brenda Patterson had tried to take that away from me, had tried to put her authority above human lives, and she'd paid the price. The mountains don't care about HOA rules. They don't care about regulations or bylaws or property values. They're indifferent to human drama. They'll kill you if you're unprepared or unlucky, and they'll test you even if you are prepared. All you can do is respect them, prepare as best you can, and help each other when things go wrong. That's the lesson I took from that terrible March week. Not that HOAs are evil or that people like Brenda are everywhere, but that when you're given responsibility, whether it's for a homeowners association or a search and rescue team or just your own life, you have to think beyond rules and regulations to the actual impact of your actions. Brenda thought she was protecting property values and enforcing standards. She thought she was doing her job, but she lost sight of the bigger picture, of the fact that rules serve people, not the other way around. And when she put her interpretation of HOA regulations above emergency preparedness, she nearly cost a young man his life. I made sure never to make that mistake. Every time I checked my fuel levels, tested my equipment, or responded to a call, I remembered Tyler and Emma and Jake. I remembered the weight of running out of fuel with people still missing. I remembered the sound of Tyler's parents thanking me even though their son had lost his toes and his dream career, and I made sure I was ready, always ready, because somewhere out there, someone would need help. Someone would be cold, lost, scared, injured. And when that call came, I'd have everything I needed to bring them home. The shed stood at the back of my property, properly secured now, properly stocked. 50 gallons of high-performance fuel, ready for the next emergency. The mountains waited beyond, beautiful and deadly, indifferent and eternal. And I waited too, ready to answer the call, ready to search, ready to save lives. That's what mattered. That's what would always matter. Not HOA disputes or power struggles or petty enforcement actions. Just being ready when someone needed help. Everything else was just noise.